The air in the penthouse law office was so thick with greed you could barely breathe. The widow, Catherine Beaumont, dabbed at dry, vacant eyes with a black silk handkerchief. The son, Julian, tapped his $50,000 Patek Philippe watch, his mind clearly on the corporate empire he was about to inherit. The daughter, Rosalind, was subtly checking her reflection in the rain-lashed window, adjusting the veil on her designer mourning hat. And in the farthest, darkest corner of the room, a young woman in a plain, second-hand black dress sat invisible, a ghost at the feast. Her name was Adela Vance. No one noticed her. No one spoke to her. They didn't even know why she was there. But in 1 hour, they would be screaming her name. The name of the woman who was about to take everything. The offices of Grant, Harding and Finch occupied the entire 58th floor of the Beaumont Tower, the very building that was the crown jewel of the deceased's empire. The conference room was a monument to old money, a 30-foot mahogany table polished to a mirror shine, walls of legal books that had never been read, and a sprawling, ominous view of the city skyline being battered by a cold November rain. The Beaumont family had arranged themselves at the head of the table. Catherine, the widow, was a sculpture of icy grief. Her blonde hair was perfectly coiled, her black dress so meticulously tailored it seemed more like armor. Beside her, Julian, the heir apparent, vibrated with impatience. He was a man in his late 30s who wore his father's company like an ill-fitting suit, all arrogance and no substance. Across from him, Rosalind, 28, was the family's socialite, a woman whose entire life was a performance of calculated beauty and profound emptiness. And then there was Adela. She had slipped in 10 minutes early and taken the chair by the door, the one usually reserved for an intern or a courier. She was 26, but the last 2 years had left a mark on her, making her seem paler, quieter, almost translucent. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a simple knot. Her dress was clean but hopelessly outdated. She held her worn cloth handbag in her lap with both hands, her knuckles white. She had been Richard Beaumont's live-in companion and caregiver for the final 2 years of his life, hired after a debilitating stroke had silenced the formidable billionaire. The family had hired her because she was cheap and had no connections. They treated her as part of the furniture. When they visited the sprawling, silent mansion, which was rare, they spoke around her, or through her. Adela, tell father that Julian needs the proxy vote for the new merger. Julian would snap, not even looking at Richard. Adela, fluff his pillow. Can't you see he's uncomfortable? Catherine would command, while scrolling through auction websites on her phone. Adela, be a dear and fetch me a green tea. No sugar. Rosalind would sigh, as if the request itself was exhausting. Adela had done it all. She had fluffed the pillows, fetched the tea, and most importantly, she had sat with Richard. She had sat with him during the long, terrifying nights when his body was a prison. She had read to him, not the Wall Street Journal, which the family insisted on, but the poetry of Yeats and Frost, which she saw made his eyes, his only form of expression, soften. She had talked to him, not at him, telling him about the birds she saw in the garden, the plot of a novel she was reading, her quiet hopes for a future she could never afford. And Richard, the lion of industry, trapped in his own silence, had listened. Now he was gone. Adela had wept bitterly when she found him, passed peacefully in his sleep. Catherine, informed by phone, had simply said, "Very well. I will have the funeral director contact you regarding the removal of the body." Adela hadn't expected to be invited to the will reading. The summons delivered by a stiff courier had been a shock. She assumed it was a mistake, or perhaps a cruel joke. But she came out of a final, lingering duty to the man she had come to respect. Julian finally cleared his throat, a loud, abrasive sound. "Mr. Harding, it's 10:05. Can we get this farce over with? Some of us have a company to run." Mr. Harding, a man in his 70s with a face like worn parchment, slowly put on his spectacles. He looked down the table at the family, then his eyes flickered, just for a second, to the girl in the corner. Adela shrank under his gaze. "Yes, Julian." "Let us begin," Mr. Harding said, his voice dry. He broke the wax seal on a thick envelope. "This is the last will and testament of Richard Mason Beaumont, dated 6 months ago. It was reviewed, signed, and witnessed by myself and 2 partners. Mr. Beaumont was of sound mind and full capacity, and video documentation of the signing was recorded, per his request." Julian scoffed. Procedure. Just get to the numbers." "As you wish," Harding said. "Let us begin with the smaller bequests." The room was utterly still. The only sound the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall and the relentless drum of the rain. "First," Mr. Harding began, his voice a monotone drone, "to the Beaumont Foundation for the Arts, which my wife, Catherine, so publicly adores, I leave the sum of $5,000. This should be sufficient to cover the catering for her next gala." Catherine, who was expecting a multi-million-dollar endowment, froze. Her manicured hand stopped halfway to her face. "What? 5,000? That's an insult," Rosalind chimed in. "Daddy must have misspoken. He meant 5 million, surely." "The will is quite clear," Harding continued, ignoring them. $5,000. Moving on. "To my brother, Marcus Beaumont, with whom I haven't spoken in 20 years, I leave my entire collection of fly fishing rods and the sum of $1 million, with the simple note, 'You were right.'" A low hiss escaped Catherine's lips. "1 million? To that hermit? While his own foundation?" "Second," Harding said, his voice raising slightly. "To my daughter, Rosalind Beaumont Smythe. Rosalind, you have always had a keen eye for, shall we say, sparkle. You always did admire your mother's jewelry collection. Therefore I leave you, in its entirety, her collection of costume jewelry, which I kept in the attic. You were, after all, never very good at telling the difference between what is fake and what is real." Rosalind's painted-on smile dissolved. "Costume jewelry. Costume. He gave me fakes? This is a joke. This is his idea of a sick joke." "He's senile," Catherine snapped, her voice no longer a whisper. "Harding, this is invalid. He was sick. He wasn't in his right mind." "As I stated, Mrs. Beaumont, we have a video recording of a man in perfect command of his faculties," Harding said calmly. "Now, for my son." Julian sat up straighter, a smug look returning to his face. The others had been insulted, which meant the bulk of the estate, the real power, was coming to him. He was the only son, the one who bore the name. "To my son, Julian," Harding read, who has so eagerly awaited his turn at the helm. "To you, Julian, I leave my entire personal library of college textbooks, specifically my first-year editions on business ethics and macroeconomics. I strongly suggest you read them this time. I also leave you my oldest, most worn pair of work boots from my time in the oil fields. They are in my closet. They will not fit you, as you have never, to my knowledge, done a day of hard labor in your life. Perhaps they will serve as a reminder of what it takes to build something, rather than just inherit it." The silence that followed was terrifying. Julian's face went from pale to red, to a deep, mottled purple. He slowly rose from his chair, his hands clenched so hard his knuckles were white. "Textbooks," he whispered, his voice shaking with a rage so profound it was almost silent. "Boots! This is impossible!" Catherine shrieked, finally dropping the pretense of grief. "He left us nothing. He left his family garbage. After all I did for that man, this is illegal. I'll have you disbarred, Harding. We contest everything." "Please be seated, Mrs. Beaumont," Harding said, his voice suddenly steel. "I have not finished." "Finished?" Julian spat. "What's left? His button collection? His old socks?" "No, Mr. Beaumont," Harding said, looking down at the final page. "What is left is the remainder of the estate." The room snapped back to attention. This was it, the loophole. "The remainder," Harding continued, "is defined as the Beaumont Tower in New York, the primary estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, the penthouse in London, the villa in Tuscany, the private jet, the entire Beaumont art collection, currently valued at $400 million, and the controlling interest of Beaumont Enterprises, including all subsidiary holdings, stocks, and liquid capital. The total value of the remainder is estimated at $1.8 billion. Julian's colour returned. He smirked, sitting back down. Well then, he left it to the estate, which I, as the only son, will control. A silly game, old man. A final, stupid test. Harding fixed him with a cold stare. "You misunderstand, Julian. He did not leave it to the estate. He left it to a person." Catherine leaned forward. "Who? What mistress? Who is this person?" Mr. Harding took a deep breath. He paused, as if to steady himself for the explosion he knew was coming. He turned his head and looked, for the first time with something other than pity, at the terrified girl sitting by the door. "All of this," he read, "the entire remainder of my estate, real and personal, I leave, in its entirety, to Miss Adela Vance." For 3 full seconds, the world stopped. The rain, the clock, the very air in the room seemed to freeze. Adela Vance's mind went completely blank. She heard the name, but it held no meaning. It was as if someone had just read a random word from a dictionary. Vance. It sounded like her name, but it couldn't be. She must have misheard. She looked at the floor, at the worn carpet, praying no one would look at her. Then the sound returned, starting as a low, guttural moan from Catherine Beaumont. "Who?" Catherine whispered, her eyes wide, her face a mask of grotesque confusion. "Who did he say?" Rosalind was the first to find the target. Her head swiveled, her eyes locking on the girl in the corner. "Her!" she shrieked, the sound so high-pitched it was painful. She pointed a long, accusing finger. "The help!" Julian exploded. It was not a shout. It was a primal roar of disbelief and fury. He slammed both fists on the mahogany table, and the billion-dollar room shuddered. "No!" He rounded on Mr. Harding, his face inches from the old lawyer's. "Read it again. You stuttered. You must have said Vance. You meant Julian. Read it again." "I will not," Harding said, not flinching. "The will is ironclad. To Miss Adela Vance, for her kindness, her integrity, and for being the only person in my life who saw a man, and not a bank vault. She is to have it all, unconditionally." Adela began to tremble. This was a nightmare. This was a mistake. "Mr. Harding," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Sir, that can't be right. I think Mr. Beaumont made a mistake." "He made no mistake, child," Harding said, his voice softening for the first time. "She's a nobody!" Catherine screamed, finally finding her voice. She lunged from her chair, her grief sculpture cracking to reveal the raw, ugly greed beneath. "She's a thief, A gold-digging tramp. She tricked him. She poisoned his mind while he was sick. He was senile. This is undue influence. This is elder abuse. I didn't, Adela stammered, tears of pure terror welling in her eyes. She shrank back, her chair hitting the wall. You little witch, Julian snarled, turning on Adela. His eyes were bloodshot. How much did you sleep with him? Was that it? You coerced a dying man. I will have you in prison. You will never see a dime of this. Do you hear me? Not one dime. He took a menacing step toward her. Adela flinched, shielding her face. That is enough, Harding bellowed, his voice suddenly booming with an authority the family had never heard. He pressed a button on his desk intercom. Security. To the main conference room. Now. Rosalind, meanwhile, had simply collapsed into her chair, a strange, choked, sobbing sound coming from her. My life. It's over. He gave my life to a servant. The family was in full-blown hysterics, screaming at Harding, screaming at Adela, threatening lawsuits, audits and arrests. The doors burst open, and 2 large security guards entered. Julian, Catherine, Rosalind, this reading is concluded, Harding said, standing up. You are trespassing on property that now belongs to Miss Vance. I suggest you leave. This building? Julian laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. This building belongs to me. It does not, Harding said. It belongs to her, as does the company you claim to run. I would check your company credit cards. As of 9 a.m. this morning, your access was frozen. That hit Julian harder than the will itself. The colour drained from his face. You can't. Richard did, Harding replied. Security, please escort the Beaumonts from the premises. The family didn't go quietly. They were dragged out, screaming threats. You will be hearing from our lawyers. This isn't over. You will rot in jail, Adela. I'll see to it. The door finally slammed shut, plunging the vast room into a sudden, deafening silence. It was just Mr. Harding and Adela. Adela was hyperventilating, her vision blurring. Mr. Harding, this is a mistake. It's a horrible, cruel mistake. I don't want any of this. Just give it to them. I just want to go home. Mr. Harding walked over and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Miss Vance. Adela. Please take a breath. This is not a mistake. This is exactly what Richard wanted. He was a very sharp, very precise man, even to the end. He knew exactly what he was doing. But why? She wept. Why me? I just read to him. Because you just read to him, Harding said softly. He picked up a second, thinner envelope from the table. It had a single word on it. Adela. He left this for you, Harding said. He asked that you read it immediately after the will. My car is waiting for you downstairs. Not the Beaumont family car. Your car. It will take you to a new location. You cannot go back to the mansion. It is not safe. I will handle the press. I will handle the lawsuits. Your only job right now is to go and to read this. Adela, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the envelope, nodded. She felt like she was dreaming, walking through a world that no longer made sense. She was escorted by security through a private elevator, down to a subterranean garage, bypassing the media circus already gathering out front. A black, understated, and clearly armoured sedan was waiting. A driver held the door. She got in. As the car sped away, she opened the envelope. Inside was a single, folded sheet of Richard's heavy, cream-coloured stationery, covered in his shaky, laboured handwriting. He must have written it months ago, with superhuman effort. My dearest Adela, it began, if you are reading this, I am gone. And you are, I suspect, very, very rich, and very, very frightened. Do not be. This was not a gift I gave you. It was a trade. You gave me back my humanity in my final months. I am giving you a fortress to protect you and a weapon to fight with. You think my family is angry now? They are just getting started. Read on. I am going to tell you why I did this, and I am going to tell you what to do next. The car moved silently through the city, a steel cocoon protecting Adela from the storm, both literal and metaphorical. She read the letter as the city blurred past, her world tilting on its axis with her every word. Adela, you must understand, the stroke took my voice and my body, but it did not take my mind. It did not take my eyes, and for 2 years I have done nothing but sit and watch and listen. It was the most clarifying and most horrifying experience of my life. I saw everyone for exactly who they are. My family believed I was a vegetable, a senile invalid. They said as much in front of me, believing I could not comprehend. I want you to remember this, Adela. Remember what I saw. Adela's mind flashed back to a day about 8 months ago. Julian had stormed into the library where Adela was quietly reading Richard a newspaper. Adela, out! Julian had snapped. Sir, Mr. Beaumont's vitals are... I said, get out! I need to speak to my father. Business. Adela had hesitated, but a look from Julian sent her into the hall. She left the door ajar, a habit, in case Richard needed help. She heard Julian's slick, condescending voice. Father, we both know you're not getting better. This merger with the Asian market is critical. I need your proxy vote. I've had Harding draw up the papers. It signs over full control of your voting shares to me. It's just a formality. You can't manage things anymore. Just put your X on the paper. I'll even guide your hand. Adela had peered through the crack. She saw Julian holding a pen and trying to force it into his father's limp, contracted hand. Richard, with a strength Adela hadn't seen in a year, locked his eyes on his son and did the one thing he still could. He stared, unblinking, and refused to move. Don't be a stubborn old fool, Julian hissed, his mask slipping. You're a vegetable. You're just a lump of meat in a chair. What do you care? Just sign it. Give it to me. I'm the one running things anyway. I deserve it. Richard had continued to stare, a look of profound, cold disappointment in his eyes. Julian, in a fit of rage, had swept a lamp from the desk, shattering it. Fine, rot in here. I'll find another way. He had stormed out, shoving past Adela. He's in a mood, he spat. Clean up that mess. Adela had gone back in. Richard was shaking. A single tear rolled down his cheek. She had gently wiped it away, her own heart breaking. It's all right, Mr. Beaumont, she had whispered. It's all right. The letter continued. My son is a thief, Adela. He is arrogant and stupid, a fatal combination. He has been running my company into the ground, cooking the books to cover his own failed side ventures. He wasn't trying to get my proxy to help the company. He was trying to get it to drain the company before the board found out. And my wife, my darling Catherine. Another memory. Catherine on the phone, standing in the garden just outside Richard's window. She was speaking in a loud, careless whisper. Arthur, I'm telling you, it can't be long now, Catherine had said. His doctors say he's stable, but he looks dreadful. Yes, I'm at the house now. It's so depressing. No, of course I'm not with him. The help is... As soon as it's done, Arthur, I promise. We'll sell this dreadful house, take the jet to Monaco, and we'll never look back. Yes, I've already moved the assets from the joint accounts, just like you said. He'll never know. He doesn't know what day it is. Richard had been facing the window. He had heard every word. His breathing had become rapid, the heart monitor beside his bed beeping in alarm. Adela had rushed in, closed the curtains, and administered his medication. "She's a snake," Richard had painfully, slowly typed out on his special text-to-voice computer, a machine the family thought was too complicated for him to use. The letter confirmed it all. "She has been stealing from me for a decade, with her lover, Arthur. She thinks I am a fool. She breached our prenuptial agreement years ago. She is left with nothing because she already took her share. And more, Rosalind. My daughter is just empty. She sees people as things to be used. She is just a weaker, prettier version of her mother. They were waiting for me to die. They were vultures, circling a body that wasn't even dead. And then, there was you." Adela's hands were shaking as she read the final part. "You never asked me for anything. You never treated me like an invalid. You treated me like a person. You read me poetry. You told me when I had food on my chin. You argued with me about the ending of a novel. You were the only person in 2 years who was real. I am not giving you this money as a reward, Adela. I am giving it to you as a weapon. They will come for you. They will sue. They will lie. They will try to have me declared insane. They will paint you as a harlot and a thief. They will try to destroy you. Do not let them. Harding has all my files. He has the proof of Julian's embezzlement. He has the records of Catherine's wire transfers to her lover. This is not a will, Adela. It is a war plan. And I have just given you all the ammunition. Do not be the mouse they think you are. Be the lion they never saw. Do not let them take my life's work and burn it to the ground. Protect it. Use it. Do what they would never do. Do good with it. You are the new head of Beaumont Enterprises. Go to the office. The car will take you. A new life is waiting. You are no longer Adela Vance, the caregiver. You are Adela Vance, the one who wins. Your friend, Richard." The car stopped. Adela looked up. They weren't at a hotel. They were at the entrance of a hyper-modern, discreet, and breathtakingly expensive skyscraper. "Where are we?" she asked the driver. "This is the Sanctuary, Miss Vance, Mr. Beaumont's private residence. No one in his family knew it existed. Your new life, as he said. It's all been arranged." The next 48 hours were a blur. The Sanctuary was a penthouse apartment that was less a home and more a fortress, with floor-to-ceiling bulletproof glass, a private elevator, and a staff of 3, a chef, a driver, and a security chief named Thomas, who had been on Richard's private payroll for years and had only ever answered to him. They greeted Adela with a simple, "Welcome home, Miss Vance. We have been expecting you." Adela found a wardrobe full of clothes, not in her size, but in the size she would be once she was no longer living on a caregiver's meager salary. Tailors, lawyers, and public relations specialists arrived, all hand-picked by Harding. "The Beaumonts filed an emergency injunction," Harding explained, sipping tea as Adela was fitted for a dark grey business suit. "They are claiming undue influence and temporary insanity. The judge has, as expected, frozen the liquid assets pending a preliminary hearing." "Frozen?" Adela asked, her heart sinking. "So, they win?" "No, Miss Vance," Harding smiled thinly. "They've frozen the known accounts. Richard was smarter than that. He set up a separate, private trust for you, funded 6 months ago, for this exact eventuality. It contains $50 million, enough to fight them, and to live on, indefinitely. The war has begun, but they've brought knives to a cannon fight." Adela looked at her reflection. The tailors had put her hair up. The suit was severe, elegant. She looked different, stronger. Richard's letter echoed in her head. "Do not be the mouse. Be the lion." "What's the first move?" Adela said, her voice surprisingly steady. "The board," Harding said. "Julian may be disinherited, but he is still the acting CEO, and the board is loyal to him. They are holding an emergency meeting tomorrow morning to vote to sue the estate on behalf of the company, claiming Richard's will was a breach of his fiduciary duty. They plan to lock you out. You must attend." "They'll eat me alive," Adela whispered. "They will try," Harding said, "which is why we are not going in alone. Richard left us one more ally." The next morning, Adela walked into the 60th floor boardroom of Beaumont Tower. The air crackled with hostility. Julian was at the head of the table, his face a mask of smug fury. The 12 board members, all men and women in their 50s and 60s, stared at her as if she were a rat that had crawled out of the sewer. "Miss Vance," Julian sneered. "What a surprise. I believe security was told you are not welcome in this building." "This building belongs to me, Julian," Adela said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried in the silent room. "I'm here to attend the board meeting. As the new majority shareholder, I believe that is my right." "You are not the shareholder until the will is validated," one of the board members, a man named Henderson, snapped. "Which it will not be. We are voting to—" "You are voting," Adela interrupted, "on false information." She stepped aside. The doors opened again, and Mr. Harding walked in, followed by a man Adela hadn't seen in 2 decades. He was rugged, older, with Richard's sharp eyes but a calmer demeanor. "Marcus?" Julian whispered, his face going white. "Hello, nephew," Marcus Beaumont said, his voice a low rumble. "Been a long time. You've been busy." "What is he doing here?" Julian demanded. "Mr. Beaumont," Harding said, "left his brother, Marcus, his $1 million, but he also left him something else. His seat on this board, which he secretly held through a proxy company for 20 years. The seat becomes active upon Richard's death. Marcus is a full voting member, and he has my full report." Adela took her seat. Not at the side. She walked to the far end of the table, opposite Julian. "You're here to vote on suing the estate," Adela said. "But you should be voting on this." She nodded to Harding. Harding placed a thick, spiral-bound report in front of every board member. "This," Harding said, "is a full audit of Julian Beaumont's last 3 years of special projects. It details the $80 million in company funds he diverted to a failed tech startup in his own name. It details the shell corporations he set up to hide the losses. It details to the penny the embezzlement he committed, believing he would inherit the company before anyone could ever check." The board members' faces turned from hostile to horrified as they flipped the pages. They were capitalists, but they were not, for the most part, criminals. They were being implicated in a massive fraud. This is a lie," Julian stammered. "It's slander." "The SEC will be the judge of that," Harding said. "The full report was messengered to them, and to the district attorney 1 hour ago." Julian stared at Adela, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was chilling. Adela leaned forward. "My first act as majority shareholder," she said, her voice like ice, "is to table this vote. My second is to move for a new one, a vote of no confidence in acting CEO Julian Beaumont and his immediate removal from this board and this company. Marcus, would you like to second my motion?" Marcus Beaumont smiled. "It would be my absolute pleasure. All in favor?" One by one, hands went up. The board members, seeing their own lives and reputations on the line, abandoned Julian in an instant. Aye. 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 It was unanimous. Julian looked around, betrayed, cornered. He looked at Adela, his face contorted. He said nothing, He simply stood up, his chair scraping loudly, and walked out of the room. He didn't just leave the boardroom. He was escorted from the building by the same security who had, 24 hours earlier, answered to him. Adela Vance, the girl no one had noticed, was now in charge. The victory in the boardroom was only the beginning. The media went into an absolute frenzy. The billionaire caretaker, Cinderella or con woman, Beaumont Empire in chaos. Adela was a prisoner in the sanctuary, hounded by paparazzi. But inside, she was learning. Harding and Marcus became her mentors. Marcus, it turned out, was a brilliant, self-made engineer who had broken with his brother 20 years ago, disgusted by the corporate rot and the vultures in the family. "Your father was a genius, Adela," Marcus told her over a late-night strategy session. But he was blind to his family. He thought money could fix them. Instead, it just made them monsters. He told me in a letter that you were his one chance to undo the damage. Adela, meanwhile, was a fast learner. She spent 18 hours a day with Harding, learning the labyrinthine structure of the Beaumont holdings. She wasn't just a rich girl, she was a boss, and she was beginning to act like one. The lawsuit from Catherine and Rosalind was moving forward. Their claim was simple. Richard was a sick, dying man, and Adela was a master manipulator who had preyed on his weakness, convincing him to write his family out of his will. Their lawyers were demanding depositions, medical records, and most of all, Adela's testimony. "They want to put you on the stand," Harding warned. "Their plan is to paint you as a simple-minded, uneducated girl who is clearly in over her head, or worse, a cold, calculating seductress." "Let them," Adela said, a new hardness in her voice. "What about Catherine?" "Ah," Harding said, a rare glint in his eye. "We've been busy. Richard's letter gave us the map. We just had to follow the treasure. Or, in this case, the stolen treasure." The deposition was set. Catherine and Rosalind arrived at the law office looking like avenging angels, dressed in dark, hideously expensive clothes. They were confident. They had the media on their side, painting them as the grieving, wronged family. Adela walked in, flanked by Harding and a team of 4 other lawyers. She wore a simple, dark blue dress. She looked calm, composed. Catherine's lawyer, a shark named Peterson, began. "Miss Vance, isn't it true that you were alone with Mr. Beaumont for hours every day?" "Yes," Adela said. "That was my job. And in that time, you discussed his finances?" "No. We discussed poetry, and the weather, and history." "Poetry?" Peterson scoffed for the jury of public opinion. "How convenient. Isn't it true you forged a close personal bond with him?" "I was his friend," Adela said simply. "A friend?" Peterson sneered. "A friend who now owns his $1.8 billion estate, while his loving wife of 40 years was left a token, insulting sum. Tell me, Miss Vance, when did you first suggest to Mr. Beaumont that his wife was unfaithful?" Adela's eyes widened. "I never did." "Oh?" Peterson smiled. "So you didn't poison his mind against her? You didn't feed him lies to isolate him from his family?" "I didn't have to," Adela said. Peterson paused. I beg your pardon?" "I didn't have to," Adela repeated. "Mrs. Beaumont did a fine job of that herself." "Mr. Harding?" Harding stepped forward and handed Peterson a stack of documents. "This," Harding announced, "is a motion to dismiss based on new evidence. You have claimed Mrs. Beaumont was a loving, dutiful wife. We have evidence to the contrary, starting with the prenuptial agreement." Catherine's face went rigid. Peterson looked at the document. "This is standard." "Turn to page 14, Harding said. "The infidelity and fraud clause. It states that if Mrs. Beaumont were to engage in an extramarital affair, or to move, hide, or divert joint assets without Mr. Beaumont's written consent, the prenup is void, and she forfeits all claim to the estate, save for a one-time payment of $100,000. Peterson's blood ran cold. He looked at his client. "Catherine?" "It's a lie," Catherine blustered. "I was never unfaithful. I loved my husband." "Then you will have no problem explaining these," Harding said, dropping a second, thicker file on the table. "These are the wire transfer records from your joint account to an offshore bank in the Cayman Islands in the name of Mr. Arthur Langley. A total of $18 million over the last 5 years. And these, a third file, are the deeds to a condominium in Monaco and a home in the Hamptons, both purchased by Mr. Langley, with funds from that same offshore account." Catherine looked as if she had been struck by lightning. And finally, Harding said, "Just in case there was any ambiguity about your relationship, these are the hotel receipts and airline manifests for your charity trips to Paris, London, and Milan, all of which, curiously, match the travel records of Mr. Langley, on the same flights, in the same hotels." Rosalind looked at her mother in horror. "Mother! What is this? Who is Arthur?" Catherine was silent, her face a pale, slack mask. "Your Honor," Harding said, "the $100,000 bequest wasn't an insult. It was Richard Beaumont honoring the prenup she had already violated. He wasn't senile. He was generous. He could have left her with nothing. He could have sued her for fraud. Instead, he simply gave her exactly what the contract stipulated." Peterson, seeing his case, his reputation, and his paycheck evaporate, slammed his briefcase shut. This is an outrage." "It is," Harding agreed. "The outrage is that Mrs. Beaumont sued to get more money from an estate she was already stealing from. We will be countersuing for the return of the $18 million plus damages, and we will be turning this evidence over to the IRS." Catherine let out a small, strangled sound. Her case was over. Her life was over. She had nothing. She had, in her greed, exposed her own crimes. The victory in the boardroom wasn't an end. It was a detonation. The moment the news of Julian's ousting and the evidence of Catherine's fraud hit the wire, the shockwave tore through New York society, obliterating the Beaumont legacy in a single afternoon. The fall was as swift as it was total. Julian, in his boundless arrogance, had actually tried to return to the office the next morning. He had arrived in his Bentley, shouting at the new security team, loyal to Adela and Marcus, that he would have their jobs. His corporate keycard, however, flashed red. Denied. As he stood on the marble-floored lobby, sputtering with rage, 2 men in dark suits approached him. "Julian Beaumont?" one asked, his voice flat. "What does it look like?" Julian spat. "Now get out of my way. I have to fire my entire security staff." "You won't have time for that, sir," the man said, flashing a badge. "You're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement." The click of the handcuffs was shockingly loud in the vast, silent lobby. The flashbulbs of the paparazzi, who had been tipped off, were blinding. Julian, the man who had worn a $50,000 watch as a trifle, was frog-marched out of his own building, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief and purple rage. His last act of defiance was to scream Adela's name, a raw, impotent curse that was swallowed by the city noise. He was facing a 20-year federal sentence, and with the evidence Richard and Harding had compiled, there would be no escape. Catherine's fall was quieter, but in many ways more profound. The story of her affair, her systemic theft, and her lover, Arthur Langley, was juicier gossip than the financial fraud. Her friends, the women she had lunched with, and vacationed with for decades, cut her off instantly. She was no longer just a widow. She was a pariah, a fool who had been caught. She tried in a panic to contact Arthur. The Cayman accounts were, of course, empty. The number for his penthouse in Monaco was disconnected. The man for whom she had risked everything had vanished, taking the $18 million with him. She was left with the $100,000 from the prenup, but her legal bills from the lawsuit she herself had initiated consumed it all within a week. She was left with nothing. The final, devastating blow came at a charity luncheon she had in a daze, attended out of habit. As she walked in, the room, once a symphony of air kisses and fawning greetings, went utterly silent. Her table, the chairwoman's table, was full. No one had saved her a seat. As she stood there, clutching her purse, a woman she had known for 30 years, a woman named Bitsy, looked up at her, her eyes as cold as glass. "I'm sorry," Bitsy said, not sounding sorry at all. "I believe you're at the wrong event. This is for patrons." Catherine, the former Queen of New York, was publicly, humiliatingly exiled. And then there was Rosalind. Her story was the quietest tragedy. She was not a criminal. She was, as Richard had written, simply empty. Her currency had been her name and her access to money. With both gone, she ceased to exist. Her fiancé, the minor European count with the polished manners, met her for tea. He held her hand, his expression one of pained sincerity. "My darling," he'd said, his voice a smooth, practiced balm. "This scandal, the press, it's simply not done. My family, you understand. The name. It's all become so vulgar." He had broken the engagement. Rosalind was left with an apartment she couldn't afford and a collection of designer gowns that were, effectively, costumes from a life she could no longer lead. She sold them, one by one. The last Adela heard, Rosalind was working at a high-end boutique in Soho, a store where she had once been a VIP customer. She was now the one fetching green tea, no sugar, for women who were a paler, weaker version of who she used to be. But Adela's story was not truly about their downfall. It was about her rise. She had won. The lawsuits were dismissed. The will was validated. She was, without question, the sole owner of the $1.8 billion estate. She moved into the sanctuary penthouse, but the opulence made her uneasy. She found herself spending most of her time in the small, simple study, sleeping on the couch. Richard's final letter was her new Bible. Do not be the mouse. Be the lion. Do good with it. She was now Adela Vance, CEO of Beaumont Enterprises. Her first day in Richard's sprawling office at the top of the tower was terrifying. The chair felt too big. The desk, a vast, empty canyon. Marcus Beaumont, now her COO, walked in, finding her just staring at the skyline. "It's a lot to take in," Marcus said, his voice a gentle rumble. He was the only link she had to the good Richard. "I don't know how to do this," Adela whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm a caregiver, Marcus. I'm not this. Richard didn't pick you because he thought you were a shark like Julian," Marcus said. "He picked you because you're not. He didn't leave you a prize, Adela. He left you a tool, a scalpel. He wanted you to cut the rot out of this company, and you've already started." That one word, scalpel, changed everything. Adela stopped seeing the money as a burden and started seeing it as an instrument. Her first act was a symbolic cleansing. She announced the complete liquidation of the Beaumont private art collection and all non-essential real estate. The Picassos, the Monets, the Warhols, the London penthouse, the Tuscan villa, the Greenwich mansion. They're just things, she explained to a shocked Harding. To Richard, they were armor. To his family, They were just price tags. They were symbols of their greed. I'm selling the symbols. I'm going to turn them into something real. The sale raised an additional $700 million. With that capital, she did not go on a spending spree. She didn't buy a yacht. She didn't buy a competing art collection. She went to the public hospital, the one in the poorest part of the city, the one where Richard would have ended up if he hadn't been a billionaire. She took one walk through their underfunded, overcrowded elder care ward. She saw the pale, exhausted nurses, the linoleum floors, the lonely patients staring at blank walls. It smelled of bleach and despair. It was, she realized, a waiting room for death. That day, she announced her first project, the Vance Beaumont Foundation. Its first act was a $250 million grant to build and endow a new, state-of-the-art elder care and hospice center. It was named the Richard Beaumont Wing for compassionate care. It wasn't a wing, it was its own building, full of sunlight, private rooms, gardens, and a staff-to-patient ratio that was unheard of. Her second act was even more personal. She created the Vance Beaumont Caregiver Fund, a $100 million endowment to provide scholarships, debt relief, mental health support, and fair wage advocacy for nurses and in-home caregivers. She remembered her own worn-out shoes, her own 18-hour days, the bone-deep exhaustion. She was, in one move, honoring the army of invisible women just like her. Her final act was for the company itself. At her first official board meeting, the one she had chaired after removing Julian, she faced the remaining, skeptical, pale-faced board members. "Mr. Slevin," she said, addressing the most senior member, "our quarterly report shows our highest cost is employee turnover. Our lowest-paid employees make minimum wage, while our executives have bonuses that could fund a school. That is the Julian Beaumont model. It is a model of rot." Slevin bristled. "Ms. Vance, this is a business, not a charity. Our duty is to our shareholders." Adela met his gaze, and for the first time the man saw the lion. "Mr. Slevin, I am the majority shareholder, and as such, my duty is to the long-term health of this company. As of today, the executive bonus pool is frozen. That money is being reallocated. We are raising the minimum wage for every single employee of this company, from the janitors in this building to the mailroom clerks, to $28 an hour. We are funding their pensions. We are investing in them." That's corporate suicide," Slevin stammered. "No," Adela said, her voice final. "That's corporate survival. We will no longer be a snake eating its own tail. We will be an empire built on a foundation, not on quicksand. You will find that loyalty, Mr. Slevin, is far more profitable than fear. This is the new way. You can either be a part of it, or you can follow my predecessor out the door." Slevin and the entire board stayed. Beaumont Enterprises, which had been rotting from the head down, began to truly, deeply thrive. Adela Vance, the girl in the second-hand dress, had become a titan. But she never forgot who she was. The final scene of her new life wasn't in Forbes magazine or at a glittering gala. It was a year later, in the sun-drenched atrium of the new Richard Beaumont Wing. Adela, dressed in a simple, comfortable sweater and slacks, was sitting by the bed of an elderly woman named Clara. The room was quiet, filled with the scent of fresh flowers and the distant, soft sound of a live string quartet playing in the hall. Clara, like Richard, could not speak. Like Richard, she had no one. Her family had left her there and never returned. Adela held a worn book of poetry, the same one she used to read to Richard. "Shall I read you another one?" Adela asked, her voice soft. The old woman's eyes, bright and clear, locked on hers. Adela smiled, opened the book to a dog-eared page, and began to read. She was no longer the girl no one noticed. She was the woman who had made it her life's mission to see everyone. Adela's story is a powerful reminder that true worth isn't in a name or a bank account, but in character. The Beaumonts had everything, but they were empty. Adela had nothing, but she had kindness, and in the end, that was the key that unlocked the entire empire. She wasn't just left a fortune, she was left a test, and she passed it by refusing to become the very people she had defeated. What do you think of Richard's will? Was it the ultimate justice, or was it a cold, calculated revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and we want to hear your take on this incredible story. If you were moved by Adela's journey from invisible to invincible, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness always matters. And for more unbelievable, real-life dramas just like this one, make sure you subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell. You won't want to miss the stories we have coming up.